If you've seen The Revenant, you know the scene. Leonardo DiCaprio, playing Hugh Glass, cuts open his dead horse and climbs inside it, naked, to escape a cold that could kill him within minutes. A shocking, unforgettable scene. One that made a lot of viewers ask, is that even possible? Did something like that actually happen? The answer, yes. And not just once. 1983, the Rocky Mountains. A lone American hunter, his horse, and a blizzard that showed no mercy. The horse died of cold right in front of him, and the man, exactly like what we saw on screen, cut open the horse's body and buried himself alive inside it. This wasn't madness, and it wasn't cinematic fiction. It was the last remaining warmth left on Earth in that moment. He survived. Major American newspapers documented the story, and it became a real survival legend. But what most people don't know is that this last resort for one man in the 20th century, this scene that shook millions of moviegoers, was a complete way of life for our ancestors for tens of thousands of years, against the harshest cold humanity has ever known. This video isn't about one man who survived a storm. It's about an entire kind of human who lived for thousands of years in a world where dying of cold was the rule, not the exception. We'll reveal how ancient humans turned fire into a brutal daily discipline that allowed for no mistakes, how they built a real refrigerator out of water and stone, how they constructed entire houses out of mammoth bones, homes that sheltered generations, and how a tool no bigger than your finger changed the fate of humans in the coldest regions on Earth. And finally, a question that still puzzles scientists themselves. Did our ancestors actually enter a state similar to winter hibernation? Before we begin, if you enjoy deep scientific journeys like this one, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so every new episode reaches you the moment it drops. Let's imagine Earth around 20,000 years ago, at the peak of what scientists call the last glacial maximum. No Central Europe as we know it today. No Siberia as we picture it now. Ice sheets over 2 kilometers thick covered the north of the continent, and what remained of the land was a vast, cold, dry plain, a landscape researchers call the Mammoth Steppe. A world nearly without trees, ruled by wind and frost most days of the year. Winter temperatures could easily drop below -40 degrees. In this world, humans were not the strongest creatures, nor the fastest, nor the ones best equipped by their own bodies to endure the cold. They had no thick fur like the woolly mammoth, no fat layer like the polar bear. All they had was their mind and their ability to plan and cooperate. And that, exactly, would determine who survived and who vanished forever. We tend to think fire was just a way to stay warm and cook food. The reality is far more complex. At sites like Abri-Poteau in France, researchers found evidence of hearths used continuously for thousands of years in the exact same spot. That doesn't happen by accident. It means keeping fire alive was a shared, organized, distributed responsibility, one that could not be allowed to fail. Imagine, no matches, no lighter, no easy way to start a new fire in the middle of a blizzard. Losing fire on a brutal winter night wasn't an inconvenience. It meant the death of the entire group within hours. This likely meant watch shifts to keep embers alive through the night, along with precise knowledge of which types of wood burn slowly and last the longest. The use of flint and marcasite to strike sparks, tools specially shaped for this exact purpose, dates back in some European sites to more than 50,000 years ago. Fire here wasn't a luxury. It was the single difference between a group that survived winter and a group that simply disappeared from it. If every source of fire went out tonight, no lighter, no matches, how long do you think you'd last? Drop your guess in the comments, and see later how our ancestors actually managed it. What's remarkable is that ancient humans didn't just fight the cold. They learned how to use it. At major kill sites, where massive animals like mammoths or giant elk were butchered, the next problem was always the same. How do you preserve this enormous amount of meat before it spoils? The answer was right beneath their feet. In regions with permanent permafrost, all it took was digging a deep pit into the frozen ground, placing the meat inside, and covering it with heavy stones to keep predators out. This was, practically speaking, humanity's first refrigerator. No electricity, no artificial insulation. Just a precise understanding of how frozen ground behaves. Some sites in Siberia and Eastern Europe show organized storage pits, some reused across multiple seasons, which suggests long-term planning, not just a reaction to hunger in the moment. This kind of storage meant one thing. Survival didn't depend only on a successful hunt, but on the ability to make that success last for weeks, maybe months, through a deadly winter. And now we arrive at one of the strangest archaeological discoveries in human history. At sites like Mezerich and Mezin, in what is now Ukraine, researchers uncovered the remains of large circular structures. But they weren't built from wood or stone. They were built from woolly mammoth bones. Hundreds of bones, complete skulls, tusks stacked precisely to form a wall that blocked the wind. We're talking about a structure that required the remains of dozens of mammoths, arranged with clear engineering intent, not a random pile of bones. Some researchers believe these structures weren't just temporary shelters for wandering hunters, but semi-permanent dwellings, used across generations, with evidence of repeated repair and rebuilding over time. Imagine an entire family, born, raised, and passed away, within walls built from the skeletons of creatures that had been, all at once, their enemy, their food, and their shelter. This isn't just hunting and survival. It's the complete use of every part of the animal, extending even into architecture itself, in a world that allowed for no waste whatsoever. Before we move on to the strangest part of this journey, if you've enjoyed it so far, hit like and stay with us, because what's coming next is going to completely change how you think about simple survival tools. Everything we've covered so far, fire, storage, houses, still wasn't enough on its own. There was one very small invention, barely longer than your finger, that changed the fate of humans in cold regions forever. The eyed needle. A piece of ivory or bone, polished with astonishing precision, with a tiny hole at one end. Before this invention, humans wrapped hides loosely around their bodies as coverings, which let cold air slip in from every side. With the needle, it became possible to sew hides and furs into fitted, sealed garments, closer to what we'd recognize today as jackets and tailored trousers, not just loose wraps. That difference sounds small, but in reality, it was the difference between life and death. Fitted clothing meant real thermal insulation, meant the ability to hunt for hours out in the open without the body freezing. And here we reach a point of real scientific debate. Some researchers link the spread of this technology specifically to Homo sapiens' ability to expand into the deepest, coldest regions of Siberia, regions where Neanderthals, despite their physical strength, apparently couldn't hold on with the same success. A tool the size of your finger may have been a decisive factor in determining which human species survived and which went extinct. And now we enter the most debated part of this journey. At the site of Cima de los Huesos in Spain, home to human remains even older than Neanderthals themselves, researchers noticed something strange in some of the bones. Markings similar to those seen in animals that go through winter hibernation. Seasonal changes in bone structure, typically linked to long periods of biological slowdown and shifts in metabolism. This led some researchers to propose a bold hypothesis. Did our distant ancestors enter a kind of partial hibernation-like state, a form of biological slowdown that helped them endure the harshest months of winter, when food was nearly non-existent and moving outdoors was almost suicidal? It's important to be clear here. This hypothesis remains a subject of significant scientific debate and is not an established, universally accepted fact. Some researchers argue the more likely explanation is simply severe seasonal malnutrition, not true hibernation in the full biological sense we see in bears. But even as a hypothesis taken seriously in scientific circles, it opens an astonishing door into rethinking the limits of human adaptation and just how far the ancient human body may have been willing to go, even slowing life itself down to survive until the next spring. And even more striking, Homo sapiens wasn't the only human species to face this deadly cold. Neanderthals, with their strong, biologically cold-adapted bodies, broad chests, and shorter limbs that retained heat efficiently, endured Europe's cold for over 200,000 years, relying more heavily on physical strength and close-range hunting skills. The Denisovans, a mysterious species we still know very little about from fossils, but whose genetic traces survive today in some populations across Asia and Siberia, suggesting a unique adaptation to cold, high-altitude environments. And Homo sapiens, physically weaker on a purely bodily level compared to Neanderthals, compensated with wider social networks and rapidly accelerating technological innovation, from the needle to composite clothing to complex storage strategies. In the end, it wasn't the physically strongest who won. It was the most capable of rapid innovation and cultural adaptation. And when the ice finally retreated, of all those species, only we remained. The sole heirs of that long war against the harshest winter the Earth has ever known. On that snowy night in 1983, that American hunter didn't invent anything new. Acting purely on survival instinct, he simply rediscovered a solution our ancestors had lived as a complete way of life for tens of thousands of years. Every time you feel cold today and reach for the thermostat, remember that this simple act is the result of thousands of generations who fought just to keep their bodies' warmth alive until the next morning. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit like, share this video with someone who'd love this kind of story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because our next journey will take you into another astonishing story about the origins of humanity. See you in the next episode, right here on WorldLens Docs.